Greetings, Marv Gardens reporting in for Sunday. You're gonna have to excuse the lack of professionalism I've applied to this particular podcast because I'm kind of in the middle of basically putting everything together and getting this little improvised machine going and stuff. But with all due, we'll just keep things rolling. So, the topic of discussion for today is religious matters. And in the midst of my fumbling, I was lost as to what I would choose as my focus. So, I'll let, I guess, I don't know what to call it. I'll let, let's just say I decided to just flip open the Bible and see what I get. And I ran into something that was actually very, very, very interesting. Well, I'm not going to really read for you. This is not really an audio book of sorts. This is more of a podcast of me basically flooding your head with information that you may or may not pertain to. So don't hold me to it. But what I'm taking today is from Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 15 to 24. I'm not going to read the verse either. You can look it up in your personal time because, like I said, this is just me flooding your head with information that you wish to go over is going to be in your personal time, in your personal matters, which probably captures what I'm trying to do with this anyway. This is supposed to be for a jump starter for you as basically entertainment for yourself. And what makes it not crazy is the fact that I just bored your ears off with a sermon, even though I'm neither a pastor nor religious nor any type of attempted teacher. I'm just a radio broadcaster, something like that. So anyway, I'll give you the essentially the gist of it. And the focus of it was around idolatry. And what idolatry is basically, choosing what you put your values to be based in. Because you can't say idolatry simply points to God, because God takes many different interpretations to people. Let's say that. And for you as a person who firmly believes in their interpretation, to insult another person's interpretation would just kind of just spit on your, I guess, your experience as a believer in whatever you believe in. So for me to speak as a person who doesn't necessarily interpret, I'll tell you what this means to me. And what this is basically telling me is that be very careful of what you choose to rely on. Everyone has crutches. Everyone has things that they need to be in their life in order to keep everything together, which is important, very important, because at the end of the day, a car that moves is better than a car that wish it could move. So, I guess basically what I'm trying to say is that you should always be wary of the relationships between what you use and what's using you. to basically be blunt. And I mean, I know it's not the, I guess the most, it's definitely positive. I guess it's not the most sensitive to other people's feelings on how they approach this situation. But it's here. It's already out there, so can't go back now. But anyway, basically, you you shouldn't expect it, because the problem with religion and science and all that other stuff is that when you take a very humanistic, human centered approach to things, especially something that's not supposed to be human centered, it kind of corrupts, spoils, degrades, bias, whatever you want to call it, the whole thing. And I guess for some people that works. For other people, that's a no. For other people, who cares? Like, it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is that basically, if I was religious, I don't think that I would allow people to be relevant to my religion. And as crazy as that sounds, in a world in which religious people carry their own burdens and their own responsibilities, what that means is that I'm not going to say I'm religious because I go to church. We're still speaking in a hypothetical here, so all feelings, and you gotta put that aside. We just got started. um, all feelings, all just what you derive from what you're trying to make meaningful should not be easily accessed by a person. And what that means is that you are not supposed to be an instrument of a person if you're talking about something that transcends day-to-day activities of, you know, uh, uh, societal dogma. And that can be hard at times, because you look at the church. The church is built on city property. The city property manages the daily functioning of that building, and the pastor has bills to pay, and children to feed, and a wife to go home to. And you think, you look at it, you think about it, and it's like, how can you tell me to not be people censored when my religion was built by people censored? And what I'm trying to say is that if you've been doing your diligence, which I'm pretty sure you probably heard sometime in your life, if you're an active churchgoer, you'll probably in your life, you probably heard it even once, to do your due diligence. And what that means is that your spiritual journey, not mental, not physical, your spiritual journey, what makes you different from your neighbors, from your government, from even your pastor, is dependent upon how you manifest yourself. And I know I'm talking very abstract right now, but that's the point. The whole point of religion, of investing your time into something that doesn't necessarily exist, is to get from it something that doesn't necessarily exist, but can still be relevant to real life and reality. And how you go about that is, I can't tell you that. But, it's, there's probably many ways, but then again, everybody thinks differently. And the most important part of this process of spiritual manifestation is discipline. Because if you don't take it seriously, how the fuck you gonna expect the next person to take it seriously? Excuse my language. But I mean, I guess I don't really want to harp on that because focusing on looking at the top in this this totem pole of priorities is probably not the best advice. So I'll summarize it by basically saying that you basically are what you want to be, what you move yourself to be. And an important maintenance of this process is paying attention to the things that you decided that you would use to move you to this process, through this process. And for a lot of people, that could be more work than it's worth. And if that's the case, you should probably, you know, reevaluate how you go about that. If you don't reevaluate how you go about that, then the process itself is not going to be satisfactory. Once you get to the end, you're going to feel like I wasted my time, or you know, I don't know. I just know that that feeling of emptiness you get when you endeavor for something and it doesn't yield what you want is not indicative of a failure on your part, but a failure on a level that you haven't yet addressed. In other news, they also talked about, you know, not eh, not placing your importance on I guess physical things, but I'm like the part of how this whole society works is placing not placing importance, but giving physical things a role in your life. And I guess not interpretation. I guess an approach for this of reconciling, not violating, you know, rules on idolatry and still keeping physical things important is limiting how much those physical things probably affect you. And, you know, that can be easily read as, don't don't let outside things affect you. But I'm like, it gets a little more complicated than that, because you look at family and you know how you relate to people that you see in your day-to-day activities outside of family, and um those different I guess those different how do you say that? Steps, there we go, that you need to take to deal with those. And you say, by me trying to focus on importance, is making importance the violation of my focus. And I'm like, but basically, more thought equals less thought, right? That's the whole idea, right? The idea that what I'm trying to say is the more work you put into something early on, the less work you'll have to do later on. And that transfers over to everything. I mean, It's not necessarily planning. It's what you call, I guess if this was a value, thoroughness. And the importance of thoroughness is addressing things in their totality versus dealing with them piece by piece by piece. Because if you deal with them piece by piece by piece, it's going to become easily apparent that you are giving resources, specifically time, to something that's not supposed to be important. But if you look at your schedule, it's pretty important. And that's the proof of that. So I guess on a logistics approach, excuse me for losing logistics in a religious discussion, but basically when you're dealing with physical things that are not supposed to be relevant, it's most effective that you deal with them as they should be dealt with versus dealing with them just so that you can deal with them for the day. And that carries far-reaching consequences as well. But ultimately, the idea is that every situation has its the end, and how positive or negative that the end is. That's life. Life is supposed to be, you know, it's not supposed to be predictable, but if it is, does that make it any less real? Another thing that got me though is that they also brought, you know, they brought attention to, you know, I guess, like the sun, the moon, the stars, all these things that are wildly out of your reach, but still day to day relevant to you. And they said that those things are not things to be admired as you would admire something you recognize as God. But I'm like, everybody doesn't live the life that the Bible dictates. So somebody's life is pertaining to or dependent upon the sun, the moon, and stars to do their job every day, all day. Then how can you say to these people that do not feel grateful for the things that allow you to function in your day-to-day activities? And this is not a critique of the Bible. None of my stuff is a critique of the Bible. But this is more of an inclusion for those who may not necessarily be in the Bible's umbrella, but still have a certain appreciation for the spiritual. And what I'm trying to say about that is that your position is no more or less important than the next person's in terms of spiritual development and all of that other stuff. And as a person that's right now actively using a specific religion's text to speak, that probably makes me biased, most likely to the specific religion's text. However, not necessarily. because my position is not affiliated with that religion. So in other words, I'm more of a third party speaking from a fairly neutral standpoint. And if that's in violation of whatever the religious text, feelings or rules or dogma is, then that is your position, which, as by definition, is irregardless of my position. But anyway, that's just me addressing the other side of things. So, they also mentioned something about, something about, something relevant to nations under heaven. But I'm like, as a religion address, even acknowledging a man-centered mechanism, what it is within itself a something to be pondered upon as a important point. Should a religious text even acknowledge nations or nationalism as something that exists in a realm that doesn't exist? And what I'm trying to say is that if people are trying to seek something greater than themselves in a place that a politician can't reach for you, or any form of bureaucracy can't reach for you, then I feel like due diligence would say that I should take note of that. My text may have encouraged attention from people who shouldn't even be listening right now. And what that means to say is that inclusion is a very dangerous principle. Which is funny because this whole verse that I'm sharing right now is about inclusion. So I guess that's more of a powerful, very, very, very powerful tool, just to see if you yourself are paying attention. In other words, you should always be careful about who, what, or how you include something. Which is also very important, since you may not necessarily be actively engaging in idolatry. But if your actions and your habits and your habits, and I guess lifestyle encourages inclusion of things that may or may not be contradictory, you should probably address it. Then again, excuse me, that goes back to the whole idea that there are people out there who just go about things just at face value anyway. And those people can, go about their daily lives like any other human being. But what I'm trying to say is that you should make sure that you do not make yourself affiliated with those type of people indirectly. And How you do that is by paying attention to how you include things, whether through action, through speech, or simply by what you insinuate. Because most people will watch for how they act or how they speak, but most people don't pay attention to what they insinuate, and that's the lost battle of a lot of people. Insinuation can speak libraries. And those libraries are what you call subliminal text. Reading between the lines, most people will call it. But excuse me. But that subliminal text is, it's going to be picked up by somebody, and it only takes one person to figure out that you may not necessarily be as what you call it, homogenous as you think you are. For you to realize that I did a oopsie. Now, what you do with this information once it becomes known to you is up to you. But understand that you made a choice. And that choice is basically saying whether you are a person that goes about things that's important, or a person that goes about things as if they're not important. And I can also speak another library. And how that works is on a day-to-day real life timeline. It's not going to mean anything. But if you ever find yourself in a position with a person who's engaging you in a method or a manner in which you feel it's not proper decorum, then you must first ask yourself, what about me will make this person be like this? Versus, what about this person is pissing me off? Because most people will always jump to the conclusion first that problems originate outside of themselves versus inside of themselves. But that's just me addressing another group that is irregardless. So what I'm trying to get to, this is not a discussion to put anybody in the spotlight. None of my discussions are. So, onwards and upwards. They also mention the repercussions, essentially, of idolatry. And I mean, it's not necessarily wrong to talk about repercussions because all actions have an equal and opposite reaction. But the idea that you're putting someone in a position in which they feel like doing something that's characterized as bad can result to direct harm from them is also very harmful. So what you can get from this is what I was just talking about, which is that basically lazy actions and habits can ultimately hurt you down the road. And you may not necessarily get hurt. You may not necessarily lose anything. You may not even necessarily acknowledge that you've made the wrong choice. However, You will notice it if you wish to notice it. And that's all I can say about that. I'm not a gypsy, not a mind reader, none of those things. I'm like the next man. I wouldn't be able to tell you what's gonna happen to you in the next hour, let alone the next day, or the next year, or the next 10 years. But it is food for thought nonetheless. So, moving on. It was also mentioned about, you know, bonds. It's essentially bonds. And what that means is that when you choose a path, you choose whatever comes with that path. And it's easy to jump back to repercussions about this, but this is less about repercussions and more about responsibilities, or basically what it takes to maintain this path. And I feel like that's most appropriate for the end of this verse, because if you do not pay attention to what you should have been doing before you did it, you'll never understand why you did what you did. And that's more of an objective sense of, you know, why things happen the way they do. And it's easy to point fingers at these type of things, or you know, it's easy to, just simply dismiss things as they ought to be, as they are, really. And that may work for some people, it may not work for some people, but ultimately you should always understand the path you walk, so that you may figure out how you fell off it. And I feel like that's probably more important than even saying, be careful about your associations. It's more important than talking about be careful what you choose to put your spiritual, your uh your spiritual confidence in. It's even more important than talking about, you know, what you include in by mistake or on purpose. Because ultimately, your whole journey will always be dictated by how well you maintenance your footsteps. And what this means is that most people measure journeys by, how many steps you took or how long it took you to get there. What you need to measure is that you took the exact same steps every time. That's the only way you can really say you made a journey. Because the fastest way to any destination is a straight line. And a straight line cannot be accomplished if your steps deviate. So we got a little bit of geometry going on here. Something like that. Anyway. But that's probably the most important part of this, is that your feet steps are your measurements. If your feet steps are bigger than the size of your foot, then you're probably moving away from where you're going. And that's, oh my God. So many people do not get this. Your feet steps are your measurement. If you cannot understand this, if you cannot accept this, if you cannot figure this out, then you yourself are not going anywhere anytime soon. Doesn't mean you can't do stuff. Doesn't mean you can't be stuff. It just means that wherever you're going, it's probably not gonna happen anytime soon. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because most people try to get to their destination as soon as possible. Problem is, you get to your destination as soon as possible, where you can go from there. And the funny thing about that is you end up taking extra steps anyway. I guess the point of that is that you must manage when it's in your position to take straight steps, side steps. Because taking side steps can most definitely lead to you never reaching your journey, the end of your journey. And I don't know if that's as bad as reaching your journey too soon. However, I know that if a person does not get where they want to go, it can definitely sit on them. And that type of inclusion, going back to that, is a sloppiness that most people are guilty of because you forget where you're going, but you know you got to get somewhere. And then once you realize that I was supposed to be somewhere, that's when all the mistakes rush in. You shouldn't do that to yourself because that's more harmful than helpful. You shouldn't stack problems on your back like luggage because no matter how strong you are, you'll always crash under the weight of infinite problems. Guaranteed. And that's probably the largest theme as well as point of idolatry. The idea that you create your own baggage. And it may seem like a good idea to, be prepared for extra baggage, be prepared for extra problems, be experienced and, get into places the hard way. But we are all limited people at the end of the day. We all have our, you know, our, how to say this? We all run out of fuel at the end of the day. And what you do when you run out of fuel, it's going to be the same every time. So, it's best not to put yourself in a position to run out of fuel because everybody will always have the same reaction, no matter who you are. When you find yourself in that position, when you need to do something, but you no longer have the means of doing it anymore because you used up all your resources, you know, taking the hard path, whatever. But that's that Sodom stuff again. Sodom, not Sodom, Sodom. But summarizing everything together and stuff, you at the end of the day are your own church, and it can be very encouraging. It can be very helpful to congregate with other churches, always. And these things can definitely lead to positive results and positive feelings. However, you can't depend on people to do all the work for you. It is always your homework to pay attention to who you are and what you do. Because if you do not, you will make a mistake down the line. Unless, you got those people that feel like, they could just, nah, fuck it. I'm gonna, just do it. they wait for the birds to come and then they be like, will my toe fit? And I guess that's something. If you know you got it. But if you don't, then what? But maintaining your diligence for yourself is very important, because when you run into that event in which you're not prepared for, how much work you put into yourself is going to make the difference between a scare and a catastrophe. Like, there are people in the world that are just like catastrophe artists. And, I guess that's like a form of amusement for them. I mean, I I can't even picture how that works out, but these people exist, and you can't critique them because their own uh, busyness hasn't destroyed them yet. And if it does, you still can't critique them, because we all choose the paths we want to take. That's how things work. You choose the path you want to take. And if a person chooses a path that takes them to places that most people wouldn't feel comfortable around, your job is not to stop. It's like the highway. You gotta hate when people stop so they can, or slow. No, they don't stop, excuse me. They, technical terms, they slow down so that they can, observe another person's path, or what you would call an accident. And I mean, I can't critique their critique because that would be a critique. But I can say that critiquing another person is a bad habit. And that's just gonna open the door for you to make your own mistakes, for people to critique eventually. Sooner or later, it's gonna happen. And it's like not. It's like when you. It's like to put things into an analogy. It's like if you're building a structure, right? And this structure is built in your image. However you design the structure, you can't build a perfect structure if you hammer it And then you're looking at the next people and thinking, I got this. I'm still being productive. I'm still. And expect your building to still make your image and still do everything you wanted to do. And you've diverted your attention to other pursuits, whatever your motivations are. That shit's just not gonna work. Somewhere along the lines, you're gonna miss an out. Somewhere along the lines, you're gonna miss a detail that is going to be crucial to the functioning and the continuance of your structure. And throwing this in spiritual terms, that is what you are trying to accomplish. You are trying to create within yourself something that will always stand, no matter what position, no matter what condition crosses its path. And how effective this building is at doing this is dependent on you. Because I don't know about you, but I like to follow the old maxim that if you want something done right, you do it yourself. And I feel like that doesn't work until you see it not work, and then you end up doing it right. You get it? So the the crucial point of this discussion is centerpiece around the fact that you are the centerpiece. In order to maintain this, all resources must be adapted, created, and supervised by your standards. And by doing this, you are putting yourself much closer to what you are trying to obtain than any other way of doing it. Because you can't say a structure is truly yours if somebody helped you build it. You can't say a structure is truly yours by, building it without putting your heart, mind, and soul into it. You can't say that something is yours if you get inspiration from things that are not necessarily yours. And not to say that, this is about, this is like what you call this? A show out contest. Who can be the most distinct person? Like, it's not a race. This is not any form of acknowledgement of an outside source. What I'm trying to say is that you need to look at the universe, not the earth, not your home, not nothing small. You need to look at the universe as empty space for you to work with. And once you work with this clean slate, then you can build things within yourself that will reach out to other people and to everything around you how you want it to do. Because if you do not do it this way, you will find yourself with strangers, enemies, and simply problems that will infest your structure because of your lack of your negligence. So, in reality, to tie everything together, it seems like negligence is the theme of this. Because when you think about it, all of these concepts covered in the verse, Deuteronomy chapter 4, 15 to 24, are reflective of negligence at some point in time. you're not paying attention to something when you're supposed to be paying attention to. And that's how problems got in. Now, this is not a surveillance tip, nor is this a saying that you need to be God, because you watching something develop doesn't require God. It just requires you to be there. So in other words, if idolatry is the sin you wish to avoid, the negligence will be the problem you need to fix. And once you fix negligence, then I don't see why you should worry about idolatry. Can you say to yourself, I am not a neglectful person? Can you say to yourself, I am aware of everything which happens pertaining to me, whether from exterior to interior or backwards? And if you can say yes to this question with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, then you win. If you cannot, if you get that feeling that I think I'm lying to myself, then I'll explain this. But we are past time anyway. This is supposed to be for supporters, but the supporters are not here yet. So, thank you for tuning in. Have a good night. Have a good Sunday. And tomorrow is probably Monday. Thank you.